You're listening to the Therapist to Millions podcast, where we get under the skin and into the brains of the world's leading therapists with Dr. Susan Spicer and myself, Damien Mark Smith, as we delve into the world of all kinds of effective therapies with fascinating and challenging cases, plus marketing tips and what's really working in mental health right now. Hello and welcome to the Therapist to Millions weekly podcast, where we get under the skin and into the brains of the leading therapists from around the world, and all the way from NYC in the lovely United States of America. We have Paula McMillan-Perez, who is a first-generation Afro-Caribbean licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, social work systems and workflow strategist, and she hosts the Why Don't We Talk About This podcast, which we'll talk about in a bit. She's been in the field for over 10 years. With a very diverse area of expertise. She served all age groups with practice specializations in anxiety, ADHD, forensic social work, school social work, and trauma-informed practices. And she does admin specialization in quality improvement and systems workflow streamlining for mental health clinicians. Now, additionally to that, Paula has been involved in a couple of books, so we're going to be talking about going into depth on those ones. She was one of several dynamic co-authors of the bestseller Latinx in Social Work, Stories That Heal, Inspire and Connect Communities, Volume 1. And she takes great pride in supporting the education and development of our next generation of social workers into the greatest helping professionals on earth. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm super excited to, chat with you.
I wish I could say I wrote that, but your bio has probably been the best one we've had so far. It's really good. I loved it.
I appreciate that, and I hope other guests don't get jealous that you said that.
I'm bearing in mind it's 7:30 in the morning. You're looking very, very fit and well and healthy and awake.
Well, thank you. I attribute that to drinking a lot of water and a good skincare routine, so I appreciate you noticing.
Plenty of water. That's the way forward. So tell us a little bit about your story. Obviously, you've got plenty of strings to your bow, but let's, how did you get to be doing this kind of work for starters?
Well, good question. And I love it when people ask, because there weren't many people out that were doing it that looked like me. I went to public school, and most of, the counselors and social workers that I even saw were white, and they didn't grow up in the same community. So one of the things that I felt like was important to me was to work with youth. I didn't know at what capacity as a young person, but, starting out working in after school programs and summer camp, I knew I wanted to work with youth. I figured, hey, let me go into psychology in college. And then I took one social work class and realized that I could impact the community. I could work with my own community. I could work individually. I could work with families. There were just so many possibilities that was it. And then MSW program came not too long after. And then I began working more deeply in the community.
Fantastic. And do you have history in your family of anyone working in the therapeutic or social work practices?
Not specifically. My mom was a nurse, so she was still a helping professional, just in a different lens. Yeah. So I grew up in a space where we did help others. She is an immigrant to the United States, so community was a big deal for her, coming from a Caribbean country. So it's something that I grew up with. And then when she did come here, she was a member of a union. So looking at it from that lens, community and service have always been big tenets in my family. And though she was not 100% pleased that I didn't go into the nursing profession, she completely understood why social work was a calling for me.
So do you have your own private practice? Do you work in the community as part of the local authorities? What do you do?
So I do a couple of things, actually. I do have my own solo private practice, which I will be branching out to group shortly. It's called Personalize Your Therapy. And I started with my first company, which was Personalize Your Coaching, which is where I do the systems and workflow for mental health professionals, specializing with schools, because traditionally they don't get a lot of social work support, and other individuals like myself who are in solo private practice and may not necessarily have that network of people to go to and, collab with, configure, or they're just feeling completely overwhelmed by documentation and maybe don't have systems in place to help assist them with, getting back to their quality of life, because we're humans too.
Absolutely. Now, in your story, did you or anyone in your family or any sort of close friends have any sort of history of mental health, or have you experienced it yourself?
I've experienced it myself. I do have ADHD,
Yep.
and I have struggled with anxiety for most of my life. We know that there can be some intertwine there, especially with women. Um, but I do have an aunt who did pass away that she did struggle with some mental health issues. But a lot of what happens in some communities culturally is that there are things that have gone undiagnosed. There are people who don't necessarily believe that mental health is like a real thing. They call it nerves, they call it, all types of things. So it's very possible that I may have other individuals that are in my family or were in my family that had something, but don't necessarily know. I just know that I've always been someone that has tried to like push myself to kind of talk about what was going on with me, which is, kind of what led to my own therapeutic and healing journey. And part of the reason that I started the podcast, because there's a whole host of things we do not talk about. And I think that normalizing that and actually letting people know that it's not just them can be the beginning of how we heal.
Just tell me a little bit about your ADHD, because I've recently discovered I've got it as well.
Welcome, fellow neurodivergents.
Absolutely, and there's so many different types of ADHD as well, which I never sort of realized as well. So, how did you find out about yours?
So when I was younger, I was one of those traditional, like she has a lot of potential, but she talks a lot in school. She's disorganized. And, coming from a Caribbean household, it was like, oh, you just need to buckle down and do what you need to do. You're here to go to school. But it just wasn't that easy. Like academically, I was able to perform, and it really kind of pissed off my teachers that I kind of knew what was going on, but I was still all over the place. My desk was a mess. You couldn't find anything in my book bag, and they just didn't put it together. And then in the fourth grade, I had a teacher that just recommended, and the way she did it is still to this day how I used to speak to parents when I worked in schools, and sometimes now when I still work with youth, is that we're not trying to identify if something is wrong, but we're trying to rule out some causes that may be impacting some of the things that we see. And it was language like that my mom felt supported enough to follow through. So I did receive my diagnosis when I was about 9 or 10. I did take medication up until college, but I got to a point where I was like, all right, let me wean off. Let me see, what it's like, as I'm, moving into young adulthood. And that was not without its struggles, which is also what propelled me at that time to identify a therapist that I could work with on behavioral strategies and things that would have it so that I was hopefully in a space where I could better manage and also, integrate into, life and situations with, neurotypicals. Because it's always that, you have somebody side eye, this person's talking too much, they're cutting you off, they're unfocused, and kind of leaning into the education about how like this is a part of who I am, but not who I am.
I love that. Yeah, I've discovered that the behaviors that I've obviously been concerned about for many years, now they have an explanation. I can at least have like a route map to kind of deal with them. And even things from if it's a bad day, I just won't do stuff, and if it's a good day, I'll do 3 times as much.
And hopefully don't feel guilty on those bad days.
And
like
that's the key.
Yeah.
Don't feel guilty, but there's also there's natural supplements, and there's obviously things you can do in your nutrition and diet which make a big difference as well. So it's been a godsend. Absolutely. So using hypotheticals and no identifying factors, give us some examples of like your greatest successes, the ones you're most proud of, and then some fascinating stories as well.
Sure. There's a few things that I'm really proud of, so it makes it a smidge challenging to like narrow it down to a couple. I will say one of the things that I was most proud of is implementing additional programming when I was working in schools. So including family into the work, like, having a Saturday program when we could like have family come in, whether it was like having a family conversation, which is what we called it because you couldn't say family counseling for therapy. Also identifying ways for youth to mentor each other. Because a lot of times, especially, in adolescence, one of our biggest struggles is trying to get them to a place where they're not just hearing an adult talking, So utilizing their experiences in counseling and therapy and mental health, that cultural aspect, and providing that level of mentorship to students or peers that are younger than them, to just let them know that like it's okay that you can talk to somebody, that like that cultural piece of we don't share what goes on in our house. There's a way to share and address your personal needs without necessarily identifying things that are going on in the home that your family could be afraid of for one reason or another. Writing curriculum that was more rooted in cultural responsiveness and not just a one size fits all. I historically work in communities of color, communities that have been identified as underserved, lower socioeconomic status, at risk, and I felt like that there wasn't enough that were supporting this population because it's not one size fits all, and got a good reception from it. So I think that in addition to, my community-based work, I feel like one of the biggest successes that I had as an individual practitioner was helping one of my clients to address their phobia. And the thing about that was sort of significantly impactful for me was that even though, one of my specialties is anxiety, I had never treated someone that was struggling with an active phobia. So I threw myself like into research, and I watched a bunch of videos, and I went to get additional trainings and CEUs because I wanted to make sure that I had all the tools in my toolkit to provide appropriate event interventions, and also kind of like scaffold it, and like so it didn't feel like completely overwhelming, not just to me but to the client. And to see where they are now and to know that I was a part of that journey, I'm just like, yes, like I knew this was a calling, but like sometimes you get those clients and you do that work that's just like, woo.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so would you say that was like one of your most unusual cases as well, or have you got a different one for that?
For me, I'd say not 100% unusual, but I do have one. For me, it was unusual because this was, and I'm not gonna call myself like the child whisperer, but that was a term that some of the teachers and some other individuals that I worked with within mental health had called me, because kids would just talk to me like in ways that they wouldn't as engage as fast with other people. So when I finally got a teenager who came to session and didn't say anything, like didn't look at me, didn't do anything for 6 weeks,
Wow.
would come on time, would sit like, in different spaces in the room because thankfully I had, sufficient space at that time. Not use their phone. They'd look at the wall. They might look at the floor, may, play with paper, nothing. So I was just like, wow, like these are things that like you hear about in school sometimes, you read like on message boards, but on the same token, it's just like, wait, this is real life. This is happening right now. So I had to dig into my toolkit. So each week I was trying something new, from just working on, okay, clearly we're not doing no counseling right now. So like we need to work on building trust and rapport, and in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. I tried music, I tried games, I tried stress balls, I tried art pieces, drawing, mindfulness. So then at one point, and I did have a conversation with the parent, she was like, "Oh, I don't think this is working." And I was like, "Well, one of the things I want to draw your attention to is that she comes. She comes by herself every week, on time, stays the duration of the session. And even though she doesn't say much, I get a wave on the way out the door. So like, so I was like, there's something here."
Yeah.
So I wasn't, and I'm not one to give up. So I was like, I'm going to find a way. And actually the way it kind of presented itself, because on week 7, she brought in, you're familiar with the game Battleship?
Yeah.
She brought in Battleship, said nothing, put it on the table, set it up. We played.
Love that.
She beat me. And I am not one to let clients, kids, or whatever beat me, but like it's a good game for that. And I don't know if it was till this day, I don't know if it was because she beat me, or because I was willing to engage in that way, or maybe because she saw that, weekly I was like putting in effort to like, trying to find something that connected. Like even the weeks that I use games, those may not have been her games.
Yeah.
So she brought in something. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't like the floodgates opened after that, but we were able to come to a space where it's like, okay, this doesn't have to look like what you've seen on TV, or maybe what a parent or a family member or a friend has told you. We can personalize this to meet needs. And I think that is one of my biggest strengths, and why both of my companies start with personalized, because it is case by case basis. No two people need the same thing. And you might not know what you need, but I think exploring it together and having a thought partner also makes it feel less daunting, which is what makes people want to try.
I love that. That's such a good story. And it's like she was testing you to kind of see.
Yeah, testing those boundaries, testing those limits.
Yeah.
What can I get away with?
And also, were you going to give up? And you did.
Yeah.
And
That's one of the biggest things too with a lot of youth, especially in ones that are in communities where people leave for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And thinking about, schools, like sometimes charter schools have a really high turnover. It's not like when I was a kid, I could go back and see my first grade teacher when I was in high school. It's, not like that as much that we're able to see, and that's just what happens in their school life. We don't know unless we have the access to that information, what's happening in their personal life. So why am I going to let you in to my innermost, deepest, darkest secrets, my fears? I don't know if you're going to be here. And based on what the mom shared with me, she had 2 therapists in the past. One had moved on and the other one just wasn't a good fit, so like they pulled them out. So I completely get the hesitation. Now, granted, I didn't think it would have lasted, 6 weeks, but I can't think of a time where I have given up. Like I will try anything and everything that's, within ethical reason, but sometimes we just need somebody to be consistent. And as a kid that looked for that, it's something that I try my very best to keep in the forefront of my mind, especially when I work with youth. And it's not just youth, adults are like this too.
Yeah.
We don't know people's history. We don't know their trauma story. Yeah. So we have to take whatever little cues that we can get and try to be as creative and engaging as possible. Because at the very least, I tell them, I was like, you're going to get sick of me. And that's okay. But I want you to tell me so we can have a conversation about it.
I love that. What a great story. That's brilliant. Now, how do you look after your own mental health? It's so important these days. It's so, so important.
So one silly thing I do that I figured out works well for me is I sing in the shower. I've created I call it Shower Care. It's a playlist that I have on Spotify, and I just have a bunch of songs that historically I'd like to sing to, because I've always liked to sing in the shower, but I didn't realize the connection between that and anxiety, that and sleep, because days where I didn't sing, it took me a little bit longer to fall asleep. Mm. And I'd be thinking about, what is this thing I forgot? What's going on next week? Did I lock the door? Days where I sing in the shower, I didn't do that. So I've begun to make that a daily practice, and it has been extremely helpful. So for those listeners out here in the community that like to sing or do karaoke, keep doing it. In addition, movement. So unfortunately, last year I was in a car accident, and I do have some herniated discs in my neck and my back, which does impact my ability to do some more traditional aerobic exercise. But getting a dog was super helpful because it keeps me on a routine of at least walking to ensure that I get movement in. Deep stretches. Stretching before bed is something that I find is extremely helpful. And hydrate. I'm not gonna lie, there are times I slack on my hydration, but as we get older, it's something we can definitely feel in our bodies. So those things are really helpful. I have my own therapist. I recommend everybody get therapy, not because they need it, but because I think it can be a benefit and it enhances. I also have a coach that I work with, because I benefit from the structure, not just because of my ADHD, but I'm able to see when I have a thought partner, what I'm able to produce. And also coloring. Like coloring is something that I've done since I was a kid. So when adult coloring books became a thing, I was like, all right, we're gonna make this happen. And now, with technology, it's super fancy. You have apps that you can color with, you have your tablet, all types of other devices where you can let your creative juices flow in whatever way, shape, or form makes sense to you. And I respond highly to color. You see my background.
Yeah, it's
So
very cool.
I think it's something that really speaks to me as a person, and it also has that repetitious movement, which can be really calming for folks like me who are struggling with anxiety from time to time.
I love that. So many juicy things in there. There's so many juicy tips in there. And I love the one about singing in the shower. You can get those little kind of like Bluetooth speakers that attach to your computer.
Yes.
They're good. They're good.
Full disclosure, I have Alexa in my bathroom. I have no shame. It's the best thing
I love it. So, in terms of growing your practice, what's been your most successful marketing technique?
Honestly, it's been word of mouth, like referral from previous clients or individuals I've collaborated with, because, I also do facilitate workshops as a person that, was working full time, whether it was in a school, a correctional setting, a community-based agency. I've always like worked on the side. So now I'm in a space where I'm moving towards growing both businesses. So I will be more actively utilizing social media. I'm fortunate to be married to a digital marketer, so he's probably going to
Andy.
assist in that realm as well. But historically, it has been a lot of word of mouth and referral, and I'm very thankful that the people that I have worked with or collaborated with have trusted in me enough to recommend me to like people they care about, like friends, family members. So it's been a real honor to just even know that that's a thing that still exists in these high technological times.
I love that. Tell us a little bit about the podcast. How did that come about?
Okay. So my husband had suggested I do a podcast maybe like for 4 years. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. Everybody has a podcast. It's oversaturated, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to last June, I was in the beginning stages of my recovery from the car accident, and I wasn't able to work, and it was significantly impacting me. I was falling into a depression. Like I knew logically that this wasn't my fault. It was out of my control, but always being a highly independent person, it was really challenging to not be, or to only be able to go outside to go to doctor's appointments and feeling like I was disconnected, that all of the things I had swirling around in my head didn't have a place to go. So had a conversation with him, and I'm like, all right, so if I were to do a podcast, how might this work? So we were brainstorming some ideas. He made the suggestion that, between his resources and other individuals that we know that have a background in audio, we could figure out production. Then I would just need to figure out how to get the guests and actually do the recording. So I started, scouring the internet for tips and tricks and things that could kind of get me started. And then I was thinking about what do I really want to talk about, or what's the theme? I'm like, yes, I do think social workers and other mental health professionals, I'm sure there are podcasts out there, but I want to try to be able to highlight what's really going on. So I started thinking about the fact that I'm always like, why is this happening? Why aren't we talking about this? Why is this? And I'm like, oh, so that's how the title came about. And then I kind of streamlined it because I wanted to just get people from different walks of life, whether they work in mental health, whether they're parents, whether they're students, from even I've had people from different parts of the world, which I'm actually looking into tapping back into again, and just talking about things that either relate to their work and their personal experience, their professional experience, but also lived experience. Because you don't necessarily have to have higher education and a degree to have a vast amount of knowledge in an area. And I think that way back in the day, before it was trendy or we even had accessibility to attend school, because some people in different countries and cultures, they had to work because that was the only way for them and their family member to survive. So school was a luxury, but that doesn't mean that these individuals don't have all types of knowledge and learning and ability that we can benefit from. Or thinking about myself in, the things that I have heard in this profession of what you don't do, or social workers, they take babies. It's all right, well, let's demystify some of these things. So that's kind of how that came about. And one of the benefits for me is that it also added to my self-care routine because, like I mentioned, I was really struggling and I was in a place where I felt like I couldn't do much, I couldn't contribute much, and I found a way to comfortably be able to do that, but also challenge some of the guests. So one of the directions I'm also moving in is, yeah, it's a nice podcast. We laugh and we joke and like, we learn about certain things, but there are also other people that may not have the same opinion as me, which is fine. So how do we have those conversations respectfully and also kind of kick up some feelings and emotions in other people so that they're like, why aren't we talking about this? Why does she feel that way? Why does he feel that way? Why do they feel that way? How does this come up? And then hopefully that continues the conversation beyond the podcast. So that's like my ultimate goal and how I got started.
I love that. So tell us a little bit about the book, Latinx in Social Work. What's that?
So I was very fortunate to, and I always say it, be plucked for the first volume in this project, Latinx in Social Work, which is a collection of narratives from social workers all over the nation. Thus far, I know we're going to expand. And we talk about different themes, some of the experiences that we have gone through in the social work profession, some of the labels that, have been placed upon us, some of us as women, some as women of color, some as individuals that may not have a clear-cut identifier, which for some can, conjure up different feelings. Also because, similar to the podcast, historically, we don't talk about these things the same way that many individuals don't talk about salary. And part of the reason that, we have fallen into the situation that we have with, mental health in the United States is because we don't get paid our worth. Not to say that there aren't other professions that don't, but if we begin having these conversations about microaggressions in the workplace, about equity versus equality or equity and equality, if we talk about the fact that, we are advocating for ourselves and our needs to be able to more successfully service our clients, and this is how we're able to do that, then that can begin, one, to show the next generation that it's okay to talk about these things, that there are people that have not just walked in your shoes, but have been doing the work to make this process easier for who comes next, that you can get mentorship opportunities. I never had a mentor. I've been in this field for like 12 plus years. And even if I would have wanted one, I wouldn't have known how to navigate that process, how to network for people who identify as introverts and think about the impact that the pandemic has had on our social abilities. Like, how do we even navigate that? So those are just a few of the themes that come up for me regarding the book and how impactful it has been. And then in addition to that, the fact that I've grown a community of what I refer to as social work siblings, like some of the co-authors, and not just volume 1, but volume 2 that came out the year later, we're very close. And some of them, I was like a fangirl. Like, I had gone to their trainings, I had seen them speak, and to know that like I now have this person's phone number in my phone and I can call and text them. I was like I was like straight fangirling, which, is not something that I thought I would have had access to, even though New York City's kind of big, but you stay in the profession long enough, you kind of know everybody. But to say that like them, I could reach out, I could ask for a recommendation, I could provide a resource, I could connect people. Like it's a powerful thing to network in that way. And the book is a big connector between our current generation, our madrinas, which is godmother in Spanish, so those that have begun to pave the way, and then what the next generation is coming. So, many of us, are educators in social work programs, and to know that there are schools, and I'll use NYU, a Silver School of Social Work as an example, it's one of the suggested readings. There is going to be a course taught on it so that there brings more visibility to the field. And I think it was a wonderful opportunity, and it's in a lot of ways a gift that keeps on giving. And to be perfectly honest, my narrative was challenging to write because some of those things that I shared There are people that don't know that stuff. Like my mom was going to read it. I was like, is she going to take this negatively? She didn't, thankfully, but I admit I was a little nervous. But I think one of the most impactful things for me is to realize that this is another thing that I can do. I can share my voice in another way. And full disclosure, I am thinking of writing my own book. I have some ideas down, so we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Have you got a name for it yet?
I'm playing with something around from anxiety to ownership, or from anxiety to authenticity, something in that realm.
Nice. I like that. And look, we'll put the links to the books and the podcast in the show notes for anyone who's interested in buying those. And actually, on the subject of books, what is your favorite therapy book and why?
Well, I will say The Body Keeps the Score, which is, super popular. Many people know about it that just aren't therapists.
Yeah.
And part of the reason it's my favorite is because it's something that not only clinicians can read and get something from, the lay person. And don't get me wrong, some of the material can be very dense if you're not accustomed to reading things of that caliber. But I think Dr. Vanderkolk paints a really clear picture of like the neuropsychology and biology surrounding trauma. And, in contrast to some other evidence-based practices, there isn't like a whole host of research on the way trauma impacts the body. But this is like, in my opinion, like the Bible on it. I'm not super religious, though I do believe. But I feel like it's one of those books that, similar to, when we're identifying like a diagnosis or why there are some things that are happening don't make sense, it can kind of bring some pieces together. Not that we're going to self-diagnose, like, I have PTSD, but it's like, maybe there's something more to explore here. And that might lend somebody to finding a professional that can help assist them with what's coming up for them based on some of the things that they read in the book. And then for those of us in the helping professions, it can really help gear us toward how we're working and treating individuals with trauma, because it doesn't manifest the same 2 ways, 3 ways. It manifests in different ways. And a lot of it we don't know a ton about, but I think it's a good way to kind of spark the interest of people who this is their passion to continue that work. So I tell everybody, like, let's pick a chapter. Let's break that down, especially with my clients that have trauma. It's like, okay, like you can read this too. Like, don't be confused. Don't be overwhelmed. Let's do it together. And they found it very helpful.
I love that. And what's your favorite non-therapy book?
It's called The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl. It's by Issa Rae, who I'm absolutely obsessed with. Her TV show Insecure spoke to me on so many different levels. And as someone who also kind of identifies as an awkward Black girl, it was nice to be seen in that way. Granted, there were some differences, but there were just some things where it's like, wow, like I feel seen. And I love it when I'm able to read a book and just laugh out loud. And my husband's like, what are you reading? Because it's a different level of entertainment. Like you're sitting and, your end table, you have the light on, and it's quiet, and then you just burst out into laughter. There's nothing like it.
I love it. We'll put a link to both of those in the show notes. Now, I don't think we actually need to answer the next question, because I think you've given us the most tips for anyone who's been on the show. And there's some absolute. I mean, if you for some reason skipped ahead to this bit, that some of your tips for mental health, looking after your own mental health, I think are just absolutely brilliant. And I think that singing in the shower one is just beautiful, and we should highlight that one and sing about it from the rooftops, because it's a good one. Is absolutely brilliant. So finally, tell us a fact that blows our mind, or tell us a joke that's one of a kind. It's basically just a little bit funny, will do. And you could win an exclusive Therapist to Millions t-shirt.
Well, I wish I was a good joke teller, but I'm not. But one of the facts, and I'm gonna laugh if you do know this, because most people don't, but sea otters, they hold hands so that they don't drift away from each other. They do it when they sleep, when they eat, and when they rest, just to make sure that they never lose their partner and their pack. So if you
Oh,
Google
that's
sea otters holding
lovely.
hands, it is the most adorable thing you will ever see.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know that. I had not heard of that. And that is absolutely incredible. I'm going to go and research sea otters now.
It's so cute. Like one of
That's
the things I used to
so
do, I
cute.
watch like little videos of them. Like they're just floating and they're
Oh,
just holding it's adorable.
oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. That's so cute. And finally, Paula, how can people get hold of you? Give us the links to your websites and your.
Sure. So my therapy website is not up yet, but it will be personalizeyourtherapy.com.
Come on,
My
hubby.
current
Sort her out. What are you doing?
Personalize Your Coaching is personalizeyourcoaching.life. And I can also be found on Instagram at Personalize Your Coaching. And the podcast can be found at Why Don't We Talk About This Pod? And that is on all networks where you get podcasts.
Fantastic. Like us, I think it's Spotify, Streamify, Anchor, all those ones. So
yeah, Apple Podcasts, all
Apple
of that.
Podcasts, yeah. So we'll put a link to all of those in the show notes. Absolute fantastic gold dust in there. Paula, really appreciate you for everything you're doing on the front lines of mental health and for also sharing how you take care of yourself. I think that's been the best section of that we've ever had. So really appreciate that.
Much appreciated. And I do appreciate you highlighting all the work that people are doing all over the world to, bring awareness, bring service, bring healing, because this is how we heal as a community. So thank you.
If you would like to take part as a guest on the Therapist to Millions podcast, simply head to therapisttomillions.com and reach out to support and let us know. All the guests on the show will get 3 months free access to the professional version of the Therapist to Millions membership, plus a chance to win an exclusive Therapist to Millions t-shirt. And if you would like to know how to write a best-selling book, secure a TEDx talk, create membership sites, lead magnets, client acquisition funnels, podcasts, and way more besides, then why not head over to therapisttomillions.com/GoPro and join our community for just $97 per month, which you can cancel at any time.